being here. I
Unbelievable.
apologize.
All set.
Okay, thank you. Maybe if you could just restart,
Okay,
Ms.
so,
Weems, briefly?
thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, you'll recall, council, that back in November, we took a report, we brought a report here to you about appointing a court of revision. We have two engineers that were appointed by the town to do engineer reports on two proposed municipal drains. And so the first one is the Singer's Corner Municipal Drain, and then there is the North Pelham Municipal Drain. So we've had identified council as being the court of revision. And so what we want to do is give council now a little bit of backgrounder on, maybe municipal drainage and the court of revision, so that you have that information going forward. We have two public meetings that are scheduled for these two municipal drains. The first one is on Monday, February 27th, so in 2 weeks, dealing with the Singer's Corner Municipal Drain. And then that same week, but on Wednesday, March 1st, we will have the public meeting dealing with the North Pelham Municipal Drain. And then after those meetings, and if council were to pass the provisional bylaw, then we're into the court of revision process and procedures. So I want to give you a bit of a background on that, how we got to where we are today, and then what the kind of roles and responsibilities of the court of revision are. So municipal drainage, it's pretty important. It's one of the oldest pieces of legislation in Ontario, and it's a very powerful piece of legislation. It provides the ability for the municipality to manage drainage and to recover costs associated with managing that drainage. And so Spreet and Associates, they were appointed, I believe, back in 2011 as the engineer to do the engineer's report for Singer's Drain, Singer's Corner Municipal Drain. And then in January of 2015, council appointed K. Smart and Associates as engineers for the North Pelham Municipal Drain. Oops, sorry. So again, council received two petitions to establish municipal drains. The petition that was received for the Singer's Corner Municipal Drain was received on behalf of a number of developers in the East Fonthill neighborhood. And they petitioned the town to establish a municipal drain so that there would be secure outlets for the stormwater management facilities. So that's kind of the purpose of that municipal drain. And then in May of 2014, you received a petition from residents on Balfour Street who had some concerns about flooding in the area. Excuse me. And so, as a result of that petition being received, K. Smart and Associates was retained as the engineer for the North Pelham Drain. So we did receive petitions, and those two petitions were considered to be valid, and the engineers had confirmed that, and engineers were appointed. And then after the engineers were each appointed, they each held their own kind of site meetings with the people who signed the petitions, as well as with other landowners. And I think some of you may have attended those initial site meetings. The site meeting, that's where it's scheduled with the landowners. The engineer hears the various concerns that property owners are having with respect to municipal drainage. It's a fact-finding or fact-gathering meeting, and allows the engineer the opportunity to better understand what the concerns are, to ask questions, and certainly to hear directly from the landowners what the issues are. And various property owners may be experiencing different problems, so it's important that they have these site meetings and speak with the landowners directly. So and then after that, they do some research, so they figure out what the drainage area is. They do a topographical survey of those drainage areas. They record kind of the soil profiles of the area, any other features that may exist in the area, fences, pipelines, you know, buildings, those kind of things that are in the drainage areas. They consult with MPCA, OMAFRA, DFO, and M&R with respect to species at risk, threatened and endangered species. So the topographical surveying work is generally done in the spring and summer months when you can get access to the lands, and the engineers will go on. They have the right to go on private property to do that surveying work. So it's usually done again in, you know, kind of good weather, and so it's the best time of year to do that work. So the engineers report, they then, after they've done all their research, they compile their report. The reports have to include plans and profiles, assessment schedules, so they figure out what the assessment is for each individual property and what a proposed cost would be for each property owner with respect to the construction of the municipal drain. And they have to consider, you know, various things like the land uses of those properties, whether they're agricultural, the type of agricultural, and whether they're residential. And also allowances for things like the road authorities and railway, if those are authorities that are in the drainage area. So we do have the two reports. This is the one for the North Pelham drain, done by K Smart, and then this is the one done by Spreet and Associates for the Singers Corner municipal drains. So these reports will be shared with all the property owners in the drainage assessment areas. Council will also receive a copy of these reports. And this is the report that the engineer will present at that public meeting in 2 weeks' time. So you'll be getting a copy of those reports.
Just a little clarification on that. So the Singers drain, it won't be everybody in the drainage area?
Right.
It will just be the people who signed the petition, the 5 developers, because they're paying the cost. And it is a big drainage area.
It's a big drainage area, and because there are a number of smaller individual property owners in the drainage area, their individual cost is so low that it doesn't make sense to attribute a cost to them, so the cost is being borne by the developers, and they're the primary benefiters of this, of the drain. So as we indicated, the reports are prepared. It's based on all the research. The reports are now on file here at the town, so Mike has them as the drainage superintendent. They will be going out this week to the various people that have been assessed and to the developers in the as it relates to the Singers Corner drain. And then the next step for us to do is to hold that public meeting, which is called a meeting to consider the engineer's report. So on the 27th of this month, we will be dealing with the Singers Corner one, and on March 1st, it'll be the North Pelham drain. We feel that the Singers Corner one is probably going to be a fairly straightforward one. We don't think that there would be really too much opposition or concern with that one. The developers are well aware of this, and they've been, their consulting engineer has had contact with Spreet and Associates, and so they're familiar with what is being proposed and all of that. The North Pelham drain, however, we think there could be some, that one might be a little bit more controversial, and there could be some residents in that one that might have some concerns And so we'll see how that plays out. They will, like I said, the property owners will be receiving a copy of those reports, and they'll be going out this week.
And they have already received a preliminary report.
They did receive a preliminary report, end of November,
Correct.
directly from the engineer. So,
On cost.
yeah. So then this meeting, the meeting to consider, which is considered to be a public meeting, each engineer will be at the respective meeting. So on Monday, the 27th, we'll have John Spreet from Spreet Associates here to present the Singers Corner Municipal Drain. And they will provide information with respect to their design, what they're proposing, and the technical aspects of their report. Council will be able to hear from members from the public that same evening as well. And then on Wednesday, the 1st of March, it'll be the North Pelham, and Neil Morris from K Smart and Associates will be in attendance at that meeting again to present his engineer's report, the proposed design that they're recommending for the municipal drain, and other technical aspects of their report. So at that meeting, you'll also hear from members of the public that may want to come up and speak about it. And so you, council, will have 3 options with respect to what to do with the engineer's report after the outcome of hearing from the engineer and the public. And one of those outcomes could be to stop the project. You know, if there's a lot of adversarial comments from residents or ratepayers, then that's an option for council to consider. You can refer the report back to the engineer for additional information or clarification or some other alternative design consideration. Or you could adopt the report by giving it 2 readings. And this is where you're provisionally approving the report by bylaw by giving it 2 readings. So if the report is adopted by 2 readings, then the next step would be to schedule a quarter revision. If you decide not to proceed because of, you know, perhaps some public outcry, then the petitioners who petitioned for that report, they have to pay the costs of the report and the work to date. But they can also appeal your decision to not proceed to the tribunal, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs appointed tribunal to hear appeals. But it's important to note that council cannot modify the engineer's report. You can direct the engineer to do certain things, but you can't modify the report.
Can I just?
Yep.
So on the North Pelham drain, if one person removes their name from the petition, it will not be a valid petition, and that will stop it right there. And the engineer and I have spoken, and that is a possibility. At that point, the clerk will have the proper paperwork to have the individual remove their names, which I'll supply for you. So.
Yeah, that is something that can also happen at this meeting.
Okay. Did you want to, there's a question here, and there might be questions on earlier things. Do you want to go right through the end and then go back, or?
It was just specifically around that.
Okay, go ahead, yeah.
So if that one person who was a petitioner, takes his name off of the petition, and that effectively grinds the thing to a halt, does he then have to still contribute to the cost?
Whoever signed the petition has to pay a portion of the costs. So, let's say we had 4, so yes, all 4, everybody who signs a petition, and it's right on the petition, when you see the petition saying, if it does not go through, you are responsible for all costs. So, you know, if the road authority signed, which they did, and other people signed, then everybody would have to pay their portion.
It's surprising that he could pull his name off, somebody could pull their name off of the petition this late in the game after this whole process and result in the stoppage of the process.
However, or some people could add their names too,
Oh, I see.
but that generally
Not
doesn't happen
likely.
at this stage. Yeah, so it's both ways, and that's right, that's the minister, that's the way they run it, and,
I see.
yeah.
Fair enough. Jacob?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was under the impression, and I don't know if this is the meeting that we discussed this kind of thing, maybe we should wait till the, March the 1st, but I was under the impression, after talking to several of the landowners, that the only signing of the petition now is the town. Is that not true?
No, that is not
No.
true.
Oh, okay, thank you.
We have the petition, and we will have it at the meeting,
Yes,
but, no,
Yeah, there were a number of,
a couple others, yes.
but there was some people that withdrew their names as soon as they realized what their assessment was gonna be, is that not true? Like, as soon as we had that meeting, that on-site meeting.
There was some, however, it was still a valid petition,
Yeah,
so we could still move forward with it.
okay,
But now if one comes off, it will no longer be a valid petition,
I see.
and the engineer will say it's not a valid petition,
yes,
and that would, yeah.
okay.
But that's up to them, and we don't,
So you're saying others can put their names to the petition, though?
yes.
Okay.
But then they're responsible for costs if it doesn't go through also.
That's not gonna happen.
Go ahead, Counselor.
And just one other thing, I see that, the engineer never did have an on-site meeting, but he had a meeting here. And
They-
is that allowed that is allowed under the Drainage Act, I take
Just
it?
because it isn't technically on-site, but it's we talk about the site,
Yeah.
it doesn't physically have to be on the site.
Okay,
Basically, the on-site meeting, he'll, decide whether the petition's valid, look at the area requiring drainage, listen to
Yeah.
the involved landowners, yeah, so it doesn't have to be on-site.
well, I suppose the engineer will walk the site anyway, so I suppose if he had
Correct.
a map in front of him, he could.
And he did, on both ones, they do have maps, and they put people's name on it and look at where the watersheds are and the contributing areas and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Okay, that's all for now, thank you.
okay. So then after that, we got 2 readings of the bylaw to, approve the engineer's report, the next step is to move to a court of revision. And then this court of revision is generally, it's scheduled between 20 and 30 days of giving notice of, the provisional adoption of the bylaw. So if you're to adopt the bylaw on February 27th and the notice goes out the following week, then sometime 20 to 30 days after that, so towards the end of March or early April, we would establish a court of revision. So this is where landowners at the court of revision can raise issues with their assessment. Or if there's any kind of discrepancies with the calculations of their land area, or their assessment. So it's very narrow in its focus, the court of revision, and they have to, provide kind of factual evidence in terms of their land area, what is the area that's in the drainage area, what is their land use, and then proportionately, how is their assessment as it relates to the entire drainage area. Based on the concerns that are raised by the landowners, the Court of the Revision has the ability to approve the schedule of assessment that was submitted in the engineer's report, or they can request the engineer to make changes to that schedule of assessment, and then they have to prorate the cost to other affected property owners. So what that means is if somebody comes in and say, oh, my assessment is too high, it should be lower, then that difference needs to be prorated across the rest of the individuals in the assessment area, so that the dollar amount, the overall dollar amount doesn't change.
Right.
And so depending on what we hear, we may need to schedule more than one court of the revision, but, hopefully we can deal with things in one meeting, but we never know. There could be lots of people that come out, or there could just be 1 or 2.
And, yeah, so just like Barb said, if you move an assessment, you have to put it on somebody else. So, I mean, in my years, I've only seen it a couple times where it went from somebody to the county or something like that, so, generally it's not done, but that's up to the Court of Revision to make a decision.
The landowners are given 21 days from the Court of Revision to make an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Food and Rural Affairs Tribunal. So there is an ability to appeal the Court of Revision's decision. Once the 21 days has lapsed and if there is no appeal, then council can give third reading to the bylaw to approve the engineer's report. If there are appeals, then it goes to either the tribunal or the drainage referee. So the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs Tribunal, they deal with appeals from the Court of Revision and technical appeals. This tribunal is made up of a panel of 3 members who are appointed by the province, and usually you've got a lawyer on that panel as well as an engineer, and then typically someone who's been involved in local government. So it's somebody, you know, the panel is made up of people that are familiar with municipal drainage. The drainage referee deals with more of legal and procedural appeals. And they will also hear appeals on decisions of the tribunal. So the drainage referee is also appointed by the province. If you're going to a drainage referee, it's very much a formal legal process, and property owners are advised that they should be there with a lawyer because it's a very formal legal process, and there's certain technical legal requirements that need to be done with the drainage referee, so it's important to be properly represented. And the hearings of the tribunal are usually held here at the municipal office, whereas the hearings or the appeals on the drainage referee, those matters are dealt with usually at the county court, the local court, so it would be the Welland Courthouse would hear those appeals. So as you move through the process, it gets a lot more technical and a lot more legal, and your appeals get very focused. So if all the appeals have been properly dealt with or have been resolved, then the next thing to do is to, or the report is being approved, then the next thing would be to proceed to tender the works. And the town would tender the project. We would award the project to a successful bidder, and construction of that work would commence. And then once all the construction is completed, then the costs are billed to the owners based on the assessment schedule in the engineer's report. If we get a bid back on a tendered work that's higher than what the engineer estimated by more than a third higher, then council will need to hold another meeting to see if the petitioners are still willing to pay. So that's why the engineers are pretty, you know, it's pretty important that their estimates are you know, fairly accurate based on, you know, tender construction prices and things like that, so you don't end up with a dispute. And then any owner has up until a year after construction of that municipal drain that they may still appeal to the tribunal if they're dissatisfied with the quality of work associated with the drain. Those appeals are usually very rare. But the Drainage Act does provide for that opportunity. I think that's all that we have, and happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ribbiak, Durley, Junkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity and in preparation for what actually might happen, I suppose. People sign a petition because they have drainage issues, they've had floods. And the engineer obviously designs to resolve those problems. So there's the potential of having those problems disappear. But if a petitioner pulls his name, what happens after that? The problems will still be there. People will still experience floods. Do they have a cause of action against the petitioner, or does the liability stay the same as it was prior to this exercise? Can you help me with that?
Are you able to answer that?
Yeah, they can pull their name off a petition, that's right, and it's done. Is there any liability? I mean, that's a legal question. Not
Okay.
as far as the municipality goes, but if neighbors are contributing water to a problem, there could be some civil matter.
There always was, through you, Mr. Mayor, there always was, obviously, the opportunity to sue the neighbor from whose property the water that floods you has come. But people don't do that. They instead go for a municipal drain and solve all those problems. But
Right.
so should those problems continue, then I suppose it goes back to status quo ante, where
Yeah, and then the only opportunity is for people to deal with the matter civilly through the courts. And those can be fairly long and protracted processes
yeah,
too.
and expensive. Yeah.
So sorry, Mr. Mayor. There are different ways to petition for a drain, and the one way, or two ways, is the minister can sign a petition, the Minister of Agriculture, Food, and the other one, if the road authority signs it solely as a road authority, they can push a drain through any property.
That would be us.
Correct. And we have signed this petition, not as the road authority, but in conjunction with the other landowners to meet, it can be 60% of the affected land, a road authority, the minister, and so this is how we signed it with the other landowners as a percentage of the land. And so if anybody pulls their name off, then the municipality could always have could always still have the road authority petition to move the drain forward. However, again, it comes at a cost.
Yeah. So again, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
I mean, we know there are problems there. So if the road authority was to go ahead and push for it, then is this whole process the same? It doesn't restart or anything?
I would think, and again, it's the engineer's decision, but I think the way he assessed it would be the same whether it's road authority signing the petition or just the 60% affected landowners or affected land.
Okay.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
You know, so I think that's one of the very important steps early on in the process is to determine if that petition is valid. And so in both of these circumstances, the petition was determined to be valid. And so now if someone were to withdraw from that petition, I mean, they are still liable for the costs that have been incurred to date. But yes, as Mike did indicate, though, as a road authority, we could proceed with that, moving the project forward if we so wish.
Thank you.
Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our panel. You mentioned earlier in your presentation that the notices have gone out, preliminary notices have gone out to folks that would be affected by these drains?
In the North Pelham area, they've received a preliminary report at the end of November.
Okay.
They are going to receive the notices this week about the meeting to consider the public meeting, the one scheduled for February 27th and the other one for March 1st. So those notices are going out this week.
Okay. Where would feedback come back from people that are concerned? Would that come to you folks? Or will our phones start ringing?
Yep.
They may
Yes, and both
contact counselors. So some of you may have already heard from some of the residents in North Pelham. I don't know, because they did receive a draft, like an early draft. The report was sent to them for their review and feedback at the end of November.
Just for clarity, was that only to the petitioners or was that to all potential affected landowners.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's what I was gonna comment on. So it was mostly to do with cost and construction, and the engineer fielded all calls, and that's probably why nobody got any, because he was still in the process of finishing up his report, but he wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page. And so, yeah, it went, the little design and also the costs went directly to everybody.
Okay, thank you. Councilor
Okay, so
Gurley, sorry.
when this comes through and I get a phone call, who should I refer them to?
You can refer them to Mike, the
Mike?
drainage
Okay.
superintendent.
Yeah, and basically, my response to them will be, come to the meeting, the engineer's gonna explain how he designed it and why he designed it, and at that time, you can have input, questions, whatever you want. So, I mean, the engineer is the one who really designed this drain and needs to be responsible and, answer the questions.
And further to that, my second question, if I may, the rationale for the assessment, is this going to be made available to the Court of Revision, to us when we're sitting there, like the method by which he came up with that particular value?
So yes, that's gonna be part of what you're going to hear at the meeting, is kind of the rationale for that assessment. It's typically it's based on a land area calculation. But you'll hear that from the drainage engineer, and he will present that.
Okay, so it's a particular formula that is used, and we would have background knowledge to that when we're sitting in review, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's usually two different methods of drainage assessment done in the province of Ontario that the tribunal is familiar with. The most used one is called the Todgman method, and he was an engineer in Chatham who came up with benefit outlet and how to assess people. It's very complex, but he'll probably say, I use the Todgman method. And you can get it online and read it, it's quite a document, but that's what they use. There's two or three, I guess three now, different ways of assessing municipal drains. And the tribunal are the ones that are most familiar with it, but he will gladly explain how he came up with that, with his costs.
Okay, that'd be nice to know. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Junkin?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my one question was answered as to, because I would think that the landowners, you guys got 30 or 40 acres, whatever, and then the town would have hardly any, and yet we're on a petition. How does the town end up with a very small amount assess them because they don't have much, and yet it's the town that would also benefit on it? You've explained that once to me, Mike, so how do you think the town would be assessed other than that method that you just said?
Mr. Zimmer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah. The engineer comes with how he assessed it, but generally a road authority or utility generally pays more than the average acre. I don't know exactly why that assessment always comes up again in the Todgman method. That's what they say. There's safety factors, there's flooding factors, there's all kinds of factors that go into it. But generally a road authority, or in this case, there's a gas line involved here too. They always pay more, so.
Oh, so even the gas line would be assessed?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh.
because we have to either go under or.
Yes.
And lots of times they want to do the work themselves. They don't want us to be around it.
Okay. Another one? There's, in that instance of the North Pelham drain, there's a lawsuit going on right there. Is that, well, I'm surprised actually that we can keep going, that we're going to continue with this until that other situation has been solved, but
I think.
not, you think you can go?
Do you, Mr. Mayor? That has nothing to do with this.
No, no.
That's a civil matter.
Okay.
Totally different than our municipal drainage. Yeah, we, as far as I know, have not been named in this area that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it is two separate.
Go ahead, and then Councilor Kersey.
Just one more then. When did you, I see that you've had this filed, the engineer's report has been filed, and at what time was it filed? Like, has it been filed a month? Because our on-site meeting that we had here was a year and a half ago. So I'm just wondering, when do you consider, if somebody asked you, when was the report filed?
So you, Mr. Mayor, November 30th, 2016.
Okay, 2016,
Yeah.
okay. And so we are a little bit out of conforming with the Drainage Act.
No.
Well, here, listen, I'll read this. Section 41, paragraph 1. Upon the filing of the engineer's report, the council of the initiating municipality, us, if it intends to proceed with the drainage works, shall, within 30 days of the filing of the report, cause the clerk of the initiating municipality to send a copy of the report and a notice stating the date of the filing, the name of the drainage works, and the date of the council meeting to the landowners. But at the same time, while I state that, the Drainage Act being the Drainage Act that it is, if you go down to section 41, paragraph 5, and it says that you don't have to be within the parameters of the dates. But, does that mean within 2 or 3 days, or does that mean within 3 months?
Maybe I should qualify. This is when the report was done, and then it was delivered to me,
Oh, January?
yeah,
Oh,
yes. So when you said when the report was done, that's why I looked, and that's when yes, so we.
So it
we
wasn't,
definitely-
so it wasn't filed to us until January.
That's right.
Oh,
And then I set up the meetings through the engineer, checked the dates and everything, and, make sure that we're in compliance.
okay.
And that's why we wanted to have this meeting, kind of pushed it in so that we
Yes.
could get everything in order.
Okay, yep, thank you.
Thanks for the clarity. Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions aren't quite so technical as Councillor Junkin's, but for clarity, so the first meeting where the engineer comes, it's a public forum. We only are dealing with the technical aspects of the report. We're not dealing with assessment. So if somebody stands up and starts talking about assessment and they don't like their assessment, they're out of order for the meeting. That-
The meeting to consider, correct. If they have an issue with their assessment, that's dealt with at the quarter revision.
Okay.
So it's just for clarity, just the construction of the drain at that point, is that correct? Is that what you're getting at, Councillor?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand
Construction
clearly
aspects.
the parameters of that meeting, so that if somebody stands up and starts making a hullabaloo about the assessment, the chair could say, you're out of order, there's another opportunity, and that it's called the court of revision, and that'll be held if and when we proceed.
It's not uncommon for that question to come up, and generally the engineer not chairs the meeting, but has a meeting, and will do the best to answer every question he can. He's gonna have to answer them sooner or later.
Yes.
So lots of times, if he can put things to rest, he will work with the people, not to cut them off, but just to give them the answer, the information they need. You will find that sometimes, unless it's a question that about assessment, and then he'll say that's a question for the quarter revision. But
I
yeah,
see.
he will they generally really will try to answer all questions.
I see.
And they want to, because, sooner they can put things to rest, the better it is for
Right,
everybody.
right. So then the corollary to that, the court of revision strictly deals only with assessment, not technical aspects again.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's getting more and more narrow as we go
Fairly
down.
narrow, yeah.
Okay.
The tribunal will deal with legal aspects and more technical aspects around the design
Mm-hmm.
of the drain.
Okay. And, Mr. Mayor, if I may, with respect to the costs, if the costs are fairly high, and yet the work really needs to be done, and there's a pushback to proceed because of the costs to any particular landowner, are these costs assessed on a one-time basis, or can a municipality make a decision to spread it out over a 5-year period or something like that, depending upon the amount of money? Is that within our purview?
You, Mr. Mayor? Yeah, so drains can be debentured on municipal taxes, and it's up to the treasury how many years they buy the debenture for.
I see.
It's interest, you pay interest and cost, yes. In past instances, I've had them where they've been 20-year debentures, but some farmers have gotten like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 assessments, depends on the drain, so
Right.
that tool is available. So,
I see. And at what point do we decide that, or do we offer that forward to the public?
I think maybe that's a question we need to ask the treasurer,
I see, okay.
how she would like to handle that.
I think some municipalities do that. Traditionally, I've seen that from Niagara-on-the-Lake. I'm looking to Ms. Weens. They often have that. And there's an debenture allowance at the region for it.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking
So I
that
haven't
that,
seen anybody else do that other
I
than
see.
Niagara Lake.
I'm just thinking, Mr. Mayor, that that might be an opportunity to diffuse part of the pushback against, particularly in the North Pelham drain. So maybe that's something we need to think
Yeah,
about
so
ahead
that
of
can be
time.
something you can,
That's a good question.
somebody can
We'll have
report
the
back in
answer.
terms of, I'll say, payment options.
Right, I think that'd be helpful. The last question I have, if I may, Mr. Mayor,
Of course.
is with respect to the validity of the petition. And it kind of alludes to what Councilor Ribbiak was sort of talking about. Let's suppose that this last person drops off the petition and now we don't meet the criteria of 60% or majority or what have you. So the whole thing falls by the wayside. But the petitioner or the individual who is suffering the most damage because of the flooding, could they petition directly to the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs and get them involved such that he would become a signatory and establish the petition? Has that ever happened? Is it an avenue that they could pursue?
The only time I've ever seen the Minister of Agri and Food sign a petition is Northern Ontario, in like unorganized territory,
I see,
that type of things. Generally, in anything I've done in Southern Ontario, we've never had a minister.
I see,
Yeah,
I see.
but that, I'm not saying it can't happen, but
Yep.
I've never experienced it or heard of it.
Okay, thank you. I have some questions, and I know Councilor Ribbiak has another
don't.
question. You don't? Okay.
Interesting, but not important, so.
Right. First of all, going through the presentation here, we spoke about size of parcel and I presume slope. But you also mentioned soil. Does soil have an impact in that, I don't want to know what the impact is, but I would imagine, for example, if it's sandy loam, one's going to expect it to drain and not carry versus clay or a road that doesn't, it just carries it all. So does the surface factor into it at all?
Yeah, there's two things. There's that, and also, for instance, in municipalities where there was quicksand, and so we put tile drains in, and the cost would be horrendously expensive through them properties.
okay.
So it can be many things, and also, of course, soil for runoff and
Yeah.
and everything. So it does have.
So
different
soil,
factors,
okay.
yeah.
I was thinking along the same lines as Councillor Kersey with this meeting to consider and then the Court of Revision. So I was thinking about the Singer's Drain. Really, the folks where the works are going to be done on their property, they can sort of comment on the meeting to consider, but they're not going to be assessed anything is what we've heard, or that's not the recommendation, so they can't really come to the Court of Revision. Is that correct?
Sure. Just the opposite. Actually, the people who are getting credit, they're getting paid damages to have the work done on their property. And you'll see it in the report.
Say that again?
They're getting paid damages
Yes?
because the work's gonna be done. There's 5 branches.
Okay.
And they will get, you, in the report, when you get the report, you'll see
Oh.
damages to be paid. So they'll be receiving money.
Oh, receiving money versus paying money.
They won't be paying, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Unless they think it's not high enough. I mean, that's a possibility, but.
Okay. The, at what point is it I'll say quasi judicial meeting? Is it the meeting to consider or the Court of Revision? I mean, yeah, the Court of Revision has the word court in it, so,
Mr. Mayor.
or are they both?
The meeting to consider is really a council meeting. Where the engineer will present the report, and it's open to the public, and you'll be able to hear from the public in terms of any concerns. So that is actually a council meeting, whereas the Court of Revision is more of you're now into that quasi judicial kind of
Okay.
proceeding.
Okay. I was intrigued that the council, which is fine, sort of can't tell the engineer how to build the drain. Council cannot modify the engineer's report, but we can ask the engineer to look at it and
Correct.
say, could you just look at that again and check that out and get back to us? Interesting. And I think, One of the things that we've run into sort of after all of this, years later, right? Some of the drains that are more historic in the town, whether somebody severs a piece of property or does a farm severance or whatever it is, there's that ongoing revision. Is that outlined in the various reports as well? The way in which you can do that, so,
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, the Drainage Act allows for that, and actually, like, when we get severance to that, Nancy circulates us, and if we find it, in fact, we had one for DeVries just recently in the last year. He severed off the farm, and we done a split off his farm and a new assessment, which was put in with the report. So that's section, I can't remember, 64 or whatever. But anyhow, it does give the authority to do that. Now, having said that, one lot's okay, but when you get into a subdivision or several lots, we would probably appoint an engineer at the cost of the developer or severer and make them pay for the report to be revised.
okay, I think those were all my questions. Councillor Kersey, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly through you. Municipal drains, when they are established traversing people's property, are they done by way of an easement, a registered easement, or is it just, nope, the Drainage Act says we can do this and we can go in perpetuity onto the property to maintain that drain?
So through to you, Mr. Mayor, this is one of the pieces of legislation that's really interesting because we do not have to register anything, and we do have the right to enter that property, to maintain it, to whatever need. It is an easement through the Drainage Act, but nothing's registered on title.
I see.
It's just what's in the drawings from the engineer, and that's why we put benchmarks and we have everything laid out so we know exactly where it is. And that's what makes it really interesting, and there's no other legislation like it.
Yeah.
And actually, we talk about that all the time at drain meetings, how that is.
Very interesting, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Junkin.
At the meeting to consider, if someone wants to take it to the tribunal, then they don't have to wait to the record of revision. They can do it after the meeting on March the 1st? To take it to the tribunal?
If the report's been given, I think, the 2 readings.
Oh, you think it has to become a provisional bylaw?
It has to become a provisional bylaw, yes. And then, they can take the design aspects of that, design of the, report to the tribunal.
Okay.
If somebody, the Court of Revision, is only dealing with the assessment, and then again, if someone is still not happy with the Court of Revision's decision, that too can be appealed to the tribunal.
I guess the question is if at the end of the meeting to consider, if someone takes that to the tribunal, does that halt the rest? Or until that is dealt with there, or does the Court of Revision still continue on even though it's going to go to the tribunal?
You, Mr. Mayor, first, the tribunal is only going to deal with construction aspects.
Okay, yes, okay.
So if somebody's complaining about construction aspects,
Yeah.
yes. And then don't forget the Court of Revision is cost, and that's done through the referee.
Okay.
So they are 2 separate things, but really one.
I see. Okay, yep, thank you.
And I think if council decides not to stop that project and
Yes.
not give the report 2 readings,
Yes.
I think the petitioners have the right to appeal that decision to the tribunal.
Correct.
Oh, and one more. At what time, I suppose it's at the March 1st meeting, will it become public, maybe it's already public, as to who's petitioning the drain?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was public right at the on-site meeting, every meeting. In fact, we've had meetings since when people could have withdrew their names, and and the clerk has it filed with her. Anybody can see it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is a public document.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Thank you very much for giving us a little bit of an education session on this. And good questions, interesting questions. I know council hasn't really put in a new drain recently. I know that we did have a short meeting or a quick meeting on the Singer's drain when it was first kind of brought forward. But I don't believe we've had a drain in quite a while, so it's good to let council and the community know what's being planned, so
I just have a handout, a little bit of reading if anybody wants to.
that's great. Thank you, we appreciate that.
The oldest municipal drain on Ontario is in Wayne.
Oh, really? Wow.
That's where the legislation started.
Still active?
It's still active.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you know the last time we did a drain here?
We were the one assuming the responsibility.
Yeah, you got it.
Are we adjourned, Mr. Mayor?
We're not. It's been moved by Councilor Ribbiak, seconded by Councilor King. Be it resolved, the council receive the presentation regarding municipal drainage overview and court of revision for information and education purposes. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you again. Thanks for the handout. It's been moved by Councilor Kersey, seconded by Councilor Durley. Be it resolved, that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed, being a bylaw 3830 to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council held today. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. It's been moved by Councilor Ribbiak, seconded by Councilor Durley, that be it resolved that this special meeting be adjourned until our next meeting in 10 minutes. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
If you have any questions about drainage, please contact us, we'll be happy to.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Can't wait.
Can't wait to get it done either.
Lots of things I have.
It's really a liability.